Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jane Rockhold. I've helping out with the Pinehurst Hub.
I'm Mark McCovey. I'm with the Madison Valley Hub.
The first item is the Be 2 Weeks Ready plan.
Yeah, we sit in on the Washington State Emergency Management quarterly meeting. They have been revamping it's called now 2 Weeks Ready. It used to be Map Your Neighborhood. They lost their copyright on that a year or so ago. It's taken them that long to put in a replacement. And I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that we'll send the materials out, but it's definitely not like Map Your Neighborhood, which was asking people to engage their direct neighbors and make a plan. And it's sort of similar to somewhat the Seattle Neighbors Actively Prepare SNAP program, but was actually more intensive. And now the state has backed way up. And really what they've got is 3 trifolds that help people prepare themselves and their family and their neighborhood. But the difference was this time they also created a community level trifold. So as soon as I can get those in, they've sent them off to the printer, and they have not put the copy in. I looked at Basecamp and I haven't been able to find them. I'll send those out to people. They're kind of interesting, but they're just so generic, and there is an online component in theory, but that's also not posted yet either. So just wanted to let people know who've been, waiting for Map Your Neighborhood to disappear, that now it's really actually gone. So questions on that?
Cindy, is there any website we should look at now, or should we wait till you send us the best link?
Yeah, if you look at the website, you won't find this stuff. That's what's frustrating me. They're talking about it in the meeting. And I went, great, I can show you guys. I was going to bring it up and show you online. I'm like, hey, they haven't released it yet. It's probably still going through legal or something crazy.
How does this affect the SNAP program? Does it make it more or less, or
it does not affect the SNAP program at all.
Okay.
Some people liked the state's Map Your Neighborhood because it did have more intensive training and better materials for people to hold meetings in their homes. SNAP was kind of like the light version of that. And so now we've sort of flipped positions. SNAP is actually more complete than just this new approach of trifolds, and it's all internet based.
And SNAP is a Seattle only program. Nobody else uses it. They didn't want to go with Map Your Neighborhood, so they created their own.
Yes, we're on to the next item, which is changes to I Am Safe, the I Am Safe program, and that's you again, Cindy.
Yep, this is a heads up for folks. We did the I Am Safe program, and for the new folks, that's a way to be able to, for our community members who need to get a message out to their loved ones outside of a disaster zone, to be able to use radio to send digital messages to either a text phone, a cell phone, or an email, or even, have someone outside the state call your loved one if all you've got is a landline. I think it was AT&T has just announced that they are terminating their ability for digital messages to be delivered like text to email. So what that means is we've truncated one of the abilities we had to be able to send a message, give us a number and we'll get it delivered. Now all of a sudden we can't use ham radio to send it to a cell phone text message. So there's another group who's working on a workaround. And the reason they're doing that is because they said, well, if AT&T has, for whatever business reason, found that it's not profitable for them to support that anymore, everybody else is going to follow. So to this group that we work with, that just means we're just going to have to find another way to do it. The net effect for us is we ultimately will probably have to change those forms and just say, hey, give us an email or give us a cell number and we'll have someone call, or we'll have another way to route it. But I wanted to give a heads up to people that when you start hearing that has been discontinued by AT&T and maybe later, it will affect us. But for right now, we're engaged with the group who's going to find the replacement. Stay tuned for new forums is really the ultimate message.
Our next item is a drill update from Anne.
So just to review, for those of you that haven't heard about the drill, our scenario is a power outage. We're on day 3 of a power outage. And the World Cup soccer games are in town and happening. So lots of visitors. That's our scenario. So not a lot of death and destruction. There's no collapsed buildings and not a whole lot of medical injuries. The drill is running noon to 4. That's the hours for the public. We are practicing a shift change about halfway through that. We want to give folks the chance to do that turnover. Hub manager number 1 to hub manager number 2, and all the other jobs switch over. We don't practice it very often. We don't practice it officially. So is there a good way to do this? Is there a bad way to do it? We are setting up a medical area. What we're interested in this particular drill is not treating patients. We're not moulaging patients. We're not covering them in fake blood. We are looking at what does it take to set up a medical area after the hub's been running for a minute. How do you take the people and the pieces of paper, and then also maybe the pieces of paper that say, I have crutches at home if you need them, or I need crutches or bandages or whatever. How do you take those resources and pull them out of the regular hub setup and set up your medical area a ways off? We don't want the medical area right next to the hub. It seems like a bad idea. So physically, we need to move those assets and get set up and get up and running. So that's kind of what we're practicing, the logistics. We do have a professional photographer who's coming, and we are running a video booth. We ask folks to answer one question in front of a camera, super casual, and then if they do, they get a prize, a gift. We are doing this at the El Centro drill only. So for those of you that don't know, we are doing the drill twice. The first one is in El Centro, the second one, which is Beacon Hill area. Second one's in Maple Leaf. For you guys, these are the 2 dates. Most of the volunteer roles are filled, but we still need a hub manager for the first shift, hub manager for the second shift. The medical, opening up the medical area, that's going to happen in both drills. That's just built into the drill. The photographer and the videographer are both only El Centro. For the second site, there are 10 spots left, so we have quite a few, but I'm not too worried about it. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Somebody had asked me the other day about, like, what kind of outreach do you do? And I'm glad Bill Nolan's on the call because he's done the bulk of the work. This is, and I'm not going to go through this, it's a long list. This is maybe half, a third of the people that we've reached out to. Cindy put together this fabulous list of just our outreach plan. Bill's been following it along. It's a lot of customizing the message to land well with the right person. What's not on here is there's a lot of official media, radio stations, TV stations, Seattle Times, all the newspapers, all that kind of stuff. Those guys are all on here. So the effort is out there, but we need you to amplify it. I am firmly in the camp of people only come do this stuff when a neighbor or a friend asks them to. I don't know that flyers work. I don't know that, well, maybe Facebook posts work, but I really think it's when people they know in their community say it's worth going to. So please help us amplify it. Use your email lists, use your local groups, send it to every group you can think of. You never know who will amplify your message. I'm looking at Jody. I'm thinking of the Nordic Museum, just because I know she's got contacts there. So find those groups, ask them to amplify the message, and put a little note in there as to why you think it's important. Facebook and Nextdoor, super easy way to reach people without a lot of effort. So please help us amplify it. And what I don't know, and I rarely hear from folks, is what do you need to make that happen? I know Bill sent out some verbiage. I know he's put out a couple, or at least one photo, and then there's the picture of the flyer. Sometimes we send a PDF of the flyer. If there's something you need that we're not providing, please, please, please let us know.
I did want to say that Bill's really excellent outreach has resulted in the director of Department of Neighborhoods is going to attend one of the exercises. A couple of people from Department of Neighborhoods are coming. I think 2 city council members are coming.
Yeah, we've got some big wigs coming this year. It's pretty darn interesting, pretty darn exciting. Go ahead, Bill. Yeah, I'm sure you've got something to add. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that if there's any way I can help any of the hub captains or other hub volunteers with their outreach to neighbors, I've got a press release, I've got the flyer like you've displayed on your screen there, and got a lot of information I can share. I dropped my email address in the chat if anyone wants to reach me. Also, I'll put my phone number in there.
So on the screen, I just wanted to show you that we've gotten this is the flyer for just the El Centro, just the Beacon Hill site. And we got it translated into Spanish, and that's starting to go out. We wrote a grant around this effort. In my head, we're going to all this effort. We're all getting together. We're all putting on a drill. We're buying snacks, all the stuff we do to put these drills on. By golly, let's take advantage of it and ask the city for money. So wrote a grant. It got approved. This is what's in the grant. It does cost us money. It's not a small figure for El Centro. We also got a pretty hefty sum to pay a professional photographer. Linda Norland is going to coordinate with that person. Linda and I think one other person, maybe her co-captain, is going to really direct this photographer. We've had photographers in the past, but they don't necessarily know what we want. And what they've done is they've given us a large hard drive full of photos, not very curated. It hasn't been super successful. Plus, we were having them take pictures around the COVID time period, and those pictures weren't all that great. So very excited that we will have a good photographer, and hopefully not everybody's in a mask unless they need to be. But Linda, did you want to say anything?
No, but we'll do our best. We know that we want shots of people, and we want things as animated as we can. We don't need a lot of static shots of canopies anymore. We've got a lot of those. We're really looking for human interest here, so we'll do our best. We can't guarantee anything, but we'll really try.
Another budget item with handouts and giveaways, but a paper cutter, and then money for refreshments, lemonade and cookies, and then because we have to pay a fiscal sponsor to handle the money for us and provide insurance for this thing as well. That cost us a few bucks. So wrote the grant for just under 5,000 and got it. So all that's coming. This is the thing I'm excited about. This one is like a guillotine, and you can cut quite a few pages. This is exciting to me because I think we could use it to make forms for you guys. My guess is that not every hub has 3 days worth of forms in their boxes. So that's what this is for, is to help with that.
Regarding the medical station,
Mhm.
So that's probably the typical scenario is you start up when you have the personnel or you have the resources to have a medical station. Up until then, all your medical issues are other places in the hub, right? Like volunteer sheets, the resources.
Right.
So you would always have this transition, like you're planning of how do you move that information to set up the tent?
Right.
Never start up from time zero with a medical station.
I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why we're practicing this. The other thing, which, it's great that Steve Smith, Dr. Smith, is willing to set up this transition thing. What I have told him is it's nice that you can get it up and running, but I know exactly what will happen because I could put myself in that person's shoes. As soon as the medical is kind of up and running, everybody there is going to be head down. How do we take care of patients? The piece where the medical officer or somebody or his delegate somebody needs to step back and go, okay, we're set up enough. Now go tell the hub we exist. Because now the next retired physical therapist that shows up needs to be sent to the medical area, not to the volunteer coordinator. And if somebody says, hey, I've got extra bandages, does anybody need them? We need them to go to the medical area. So it's just letting everybody in the hub know that this is now up and running so that everything works smoothly. That's the piece I'm That's the piece I think could easily get lost.
The next section is strategic planning, again with Anne.
All right, so we are calling it the thought group. We talked about this at the deep dive in April. This is not the strategic planning group. This is the pre-strategic planning group. We do have a good group forming, very, very excited, but it's not firmed up yet. So I'm not releasing names or anything like that. The first step, or one of the steps to get ready for this group, is Cindy and I have basically made a list of all the stuff that we do, that we currently do, so nothing gets forgotten. The group's mission is to give us some guidance, the whole network, some guidance of how to move forward towards strategic planning, but don't let any balls drop. FLDIGI stands for Fast, Light, Digital. It is a way to send messages over ham radio with a computer interface. So I've got a picture on my computer. I can send it over ham radio waves. It reminds me of fax machines or dial-up modems. Makes a lot of noise, like beep, 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 beep. Makes weird noise. And then the image shows up the way it was intended to on a computer on the other end. So that's what this whole system is. We had a class. This is a picture of the class. We had 16 folks in the class. You have to download 2 programs. FLDIGI receives the messages. FL Message captures it and makes it available later. I think that's a decent enough explanation. We did have a little problem with those 2 programs talking to one another, but we sent a lot of messages. I think we went through at least a dozen messages in that room where we were all sitting. And all of these computer operators got that message except for one. And this was even after, well, because one of the exercises we wanted them to do was to shut their computer down and reboot it, because that seems to give people problems. Like, it's working great, but as soon as I shut my computer down, everything went to heck. Again, everybody except for one person, and that was a microphone issue in the laptop that we could not get resolved. He sat there the whole time trying to resolve it and couldn't figure it out. So anyway, pretty successful in my head. We weren't sure even going to get to 50%, but did it really well. We had the folks that were in this class, we arranged for a special Monday night digital message to be sent out during the normal radio nets. And I've only heard back from 3 people so far. It was just Monday, and I'm wondering if maybe they didn't email me. Maybe they emailed somebody else. Anyway, 2 out of the 3 got the message. So far, so good. We are probably going to do something like this. We may just repeat exactly what we did using the lessons learned. We did have a couple lessons learned, so we might just do it in July again. Fairly successful. The reason we're even messing with this digital radio transmission is our understanding is that ACS, the big radio folks, will send out messages to the hubs 2 ways. They will send it out digitally, and then they will send it out using their voice. So they will read the message. If our radio operators can get that message on a computer screen, it's faster than talking, and it's accurate because it was text and now it's text again, and nothing got lost in transmission. Really accurate way to receive information, and a ton of information. Like, you can send a whole page and it takes under 2 minutes, something like that. They'll send out the digital first, so our radio operators get a chance to receive it. And if they don't, they can continue monitoring that radio frequency and get the voice transmission.
I have a question. This is Gabrielle. This is more a ham radio thing, that if we're not in ham, we're not necessarily worried about this?
Yeah, good question.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay.
And thank you for bringing that up. So we had ham radio operators and GMRS radio operators in that room. Either kind of radio operator can receive. The only person that can send a message using this is a ham radio operator. So we are definitely in receive mode. Shout out to Pat Mork, who was there, not necessarily a radio operator, but she was there plugging away, trying to make it work. I tried to impress upon this group that this is all fun and interesting and all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Really don't care about the technical part of this. The issue that we have at the hub level is I don't care if you have all this great text on your laptop computer. If you don't have a way to get it to the hub so we can put it on the whiteboards for our neighbors, it's worthless. What I called it was that last mile. And I said, you guys, you have to think about that last mile. It doesn't help anybody if it's sitting on your laptop. It needs to get to the hub. So figure out how to do it. Walk your laptop over, take a picture of your laptop screen, and hand your phone to someone to walk it over to the information area. Couple more little things. Just want to let you know, Catherine Keller and Jeff Silverman and Cindy and the Office of Emergency Management have been working really hard on getting this map updated. This is the 2025 map. They're 11 by 17s. They are probably being printed early next week. So we will have those to not necessarily hand out at outreach events, but definitely have for folks to find their closest hub if they don't want to jump on their phone and find their hub that way. So those are on their way.
I was just wondering if this updated map will be posted on the Seattle Emergency Hub's website.
Yes. So this is how this all works. The map that's on the website is a map created in Google Maps or My Maps or whatever. It's something that Cindy and I have access to and we can move things around. This map is embedded in a program called Web EOC that emergency operations centers across the world, or across the US at least, use to manage emergencies. So the hubs are in their program, are in their program. Because they're sweet enough to pay for it, we ask them to highlight the hubs and print the map for us. So there's two different maps. Catherine and Jeff have been really good about making sure that those two say the same thing. And then OEM pulls this information out of Web EOC and literally prints the 11 by 17s for us, just to save us some bucks.
But I do think that somewhere on our web, we do have on our web page, we have a link to the printable map, which is where
Yeah.
I would drop this PDF. So it's available both in the static PDF and in the interactive tab.
Just keep in mind, as soon as this thing is printed, it's out of date a month later because a hub has either come or gone or some kind of change. So they're good, but they're not as good. They're not as accurate as what's on the website. Moving on, happy National Stop the Bleed Day, May 22nd.
So it looks like the next item we have is Linda Norland, discussion around revising the hub network's name.
I want to pick up from our conversation at the March Hub Captains meeting where we talked about the name and our current names. As you know, we have two current names, Seattle Emergency Hubs, which is our domain name. It's what's on the website. And the formal name, which is Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs. Why we need to firm up the name? Well, we have plans for an upcoming website, a new website. We're going to need a word mark for it and for other uses besides the website. And I'm using that word advisedly and not logo, because when I use the word logo, people tend to think it's going to be a circle. It's going to be like a little seal. It's going to look like a government agency's mark. And most nonprofits now have something like a nice way that they treat their name with certain typefaces and certain colors, but it doesn't have to be in a little seal or kind of a picture format. The UW team that we already talked about, that you already had okayed for this job, can design it this summer, as far as I know. And we need to confirm which name we're going to use before that work begins, because that's will be then literally set in type the way we want it to be for the new website and so forth. So we need to have one name instead of two. I had sent out a survey to you all, and 37 people responded to it, which is great. And we asked in that survey what name you use when you refer to the hub network in written communications. And so we see here on the screen that 15 people said they use the full name Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs, and 23 people said they just use Seattle Emergency Hubs. A couple of people said depends on who we're talking to, how formal it is, and if they already know who we are. And then we asked, when you talk about the hub network, when you talk about it, not just in written communications, but when you actually talk about it, what do you call it? And about 12 people said they used the full name, and twice as many people, 24, said they used Seattle Emergency Hubs. Some people again said, one person said, depends on the situation. And the other one said it would either be the formal name with communication in it or just Seattle Hubs, but very seldom the in between, the Seattle Emergency Hubs. What I was asking then also is, when you talk with people who are unfamiliar with the hubs, do you think the name Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs is helpful or not helpful? And I want to just say here as in an aside that we know that the name alone cannot explain what the hubs are. The hubs are a little hard to explain even when you have well more than just a name, as we know. But I just wanted to know, is the name helping or not helping? Well, as you can see, about a third, the blue third there says it's helpful in explaining what we're about. And more than a third, 40% more, said that it could be more helpful. And 27% said not very helpful. So if you add up the could be more helpful and the not very helpful, you got 2/3 of the people kind of indicating there might be something maybe a little bit better we can do. Don't get too dizzy looking at the screen. I'm going to summarize this on the next slide, but we asked which of these words would you apply to the hub network and choose 5. Probably all of them could be at some level or other, but there were some clear winners here. You can see at the top, there's volunteer, neighbor, emergency, preparing, communication. There's only one that had almost as many responders, which was disaster. The 6 words selected the most were neighbor and neighborhood, emergency, volunteer, communication, preparing, and disaster. And then we actually asked, okay, what name for the hub network would you think might be helpful? Well, there were 7 people that thought Seattle Emergency Hubs was still the best because it was, and these are different people's, I have combined different people's responses because of its simplicity. That was one response. It's easier to write and say, someone else, and that the hubs do more than just communications. And then there's been some variations on the names. There's some slight differences, like this variation added Seattle to it. So Seattle Emergency Hub Network, or it had a network to it, sorry. And then the next most popular one that came out was neighborhood emergency hubs, with the variation added of adding Seattle to it or just calling it neighborhood hubs. And then the next was the formal name that we have now, Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs. Although some people thought maybe we should use the word disaster, and I want to get back to that in a minute on another slide. 3 people took the time to say that the word hub is great and we should keep it. Someone said hub is the most helpful term, and another person said it should either be hub or neighborhood hub. And then I didn't count in that 3, this other one that used hubs, the next one down. This person thought it should be hubs for disaster help, and then offered 3 different ways, wordings that are slightly similar using the same words. Another name was Seattle Emergency Assistance Hubs. And then there was one person who gave a number of variations on the idea of neighbor aid and spelled different ways. And then someone else named mutual aid stations, but they weren't really suggesting that as a name. They just thought that might be a descriptor. So I thought that it was pretty safe to say that some of these suggestions were too long. Even the person who suggested the first one on the list, the Seattle Disaster Neighborhood Help Hub, even said in suggesting it, they said, but I know it's too long. And so these other ones that have 5 words, especially when they have at least 3 long words in them, 5 or more words with 3 long words, are just too long. I think we can't really seriously consider those, I'm afraid. And then a couple of those names were suggesting some acronyms. We got a bunch more acronyms. There's somebody who wanted to make acronyms out of the letters HUB, Help Uniting After a Breakdown, Help for Urbanites After Breakdown, or acronyms on the word help, help after emergency and local preparation, helping each other learn to prepare. And then there were other acronyms altogether, none of which actually make a memorable word. I don't know. I'm not sure what the advantage would be, but post-disaster organizers, PDOs, neighborhood organizers after disasters, NOADs, and when everything goes wrong, WEGW. There's a couple of suggestions that we can't do because they overlap city agencies' names or missions, like There was a suggestion of Seattle Emergency Response Hub or Seattle Neighborhood Disaster Response Hub. I think that because we aren't first responders, I think it would be very dicey to be using the word response. And then Seattle Crisis Communication Center, Seattle Crisis Communication Pop-ups. There is a crisis center in Seattle. It's for the quote that I put here. It's for police, medics, and mental health professionals to help people who are in a crisis where they might be taken to jail or to an emergency room or psychiatric hospital. So that has a meaning that we can't easily overcome, and we probably don't want to go near that one either. So I think there's also the question about the word emergency versus disaster in our name. The aftermath of disasters is what we're preparing for, and our own video makes that distinction about emergency being where something bad happens, but you can still call 911 and somebody's going to come and help you. And disaster when many of the systems have been broken or interrupted and we can't count on that and we are going to be on our own. Somebody made an interesting point at the last meeting, which is that disaster management agency names are something we should be coordinating with. And for reasons that I don't fully understand, all of them use the word emergency. So we've got the city's Seattle Office of Emergency Management, at the county level, Office of Emergency Management, King County. Same way with the state, same way with the federal. So they all use the word emergency and not disaster, for better or worse. I want to pause here first and ask if anybody has any questions, and then we could go back and look at the names if you want. And what I'd like to do, if we can, is narrow it down to like 3 or 5 of the serious contenders. And then later we could email people and find out what their preferences are among that. Does that seem like an okay way to proceed?
An emergency is when a single entity can't handle something and they have to, escalate sideways within the department. And then emergency management always says disasters are when we have to now go upwards and we go up to the county or up to the state. So that's why emergency is in their names, is because they really help facilitate something that that jurisdiction can respond to, but they can also elevate it if it goes to disaster. We have always been, we're just going to step in when it's a disaster. We're not going to, there's a heat wave on and we're having to open up libraries. We don't stand up to help people get into the libraries. We, like Linda said, are at the major disaster stage. And if we'd known all this when we were first picking our name, we probably would have been the disaster hubs, because that indicates that ultimate, it is, as Linda put it, above and beyond anything anybody expected.
Anybody else have any thoughts about that? The emergency versus disaster in our name?
Yeah, I think that disaster is perhaps limiting because, now correct me if I'm wrong, but disaster implies massive destruction, injury, loss of life, and so on. Whereas an emergency can be something that inhibits normal functioning in a way that's likely to cause significant harm. For that matter, the premise of our emergency drills next month would, in my mind, constitute an emergency, not a disaster, because, as we've discussed earlier, there's no destruction or loss of life like there would be for, say, an earthquake, which would indeed be a disaster. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody?
Cindy
Cindy again?
Yeah, that is why communications was in our name, is because we don't stand up until all communications are down. That was the premise, whether it's an emergency or disaster. If the neighbors can't find out what's going on, we originally started as information hubs and then progressed to, well, let's share resources, let's share skills. A couple of times a year, I get someone calling me saying, my son was just hit in an accident. You guys are the emergency hubs. What can you help me? And I got a call last month from a woman whose tree fell on her house, and she got, Googled emergency hubs, and I was the person she called.
Are we talking about the all communications are down aspect too? Is that kind of on the table?
You
'Cause
mean, are we talking about the mission?
yeah, I mean, so you mentioned that's part of it because we only stand up when all communications are down. But I think that the landscape of the technology that's available now is different than it was even a few years ago. Especially with like T-Mobile partnering with Starlink to bring, internet access or satellite access to cell phones. I think that we can do more when there are, some other options. We can help streamline data and information, even if there's some communications. So I don't know if that's something we want to consider.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, for the future, yeah.
I'd like to also mention one thing. I think that one of the things we need to think of when we think about what the name should be is how the public will hear the name and how they will react to it, not so much how we know. We may know all kinds of things about how agencies work or this or that, the other thing, but when someone hears the word emergency or hears the word disaster, what is the public, how do they process that? And here's one of the concerns I have is I think it's a very tough sell to even get people to think about emergency preparation or disaster preparation, whatever you want to call it. We know from the research of Carson McPherson that we heard, at a meeting I guess it was a year or so ago, that people are not inclined to take protective action for themselves, are not inclined to prepare. You have to actually go to them and use a kind of soft messaging and repeat the messaging. And it doesn't happen just after them knowing on a factual basis that this might happen. And so when I think of the word emergency, even though I think disaster is a more accurate term, I'm worried that that makes things sound even worse and sounds like something that even more would want to resist or deny or not do anything about, because a disaster sounds like things are so bad. I worry that will cause a fatalistic reaction in people who they'll go, oh, well, a disaster, that's so bad that why would you even prepare for it, I mean, it may be that the emergency thing is kind of a phony name to put it on it, but I think it might be a useful phony name to put on it because for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Linda. It's so hard to get people to prepare, just in general.
I think there's advantages to calling it what it is, and I really prefer the word disaster over emergency. Disaster, to my mind, really calls upon people to get together and work on things that more systemically and more overall, which is what we're really asking people to do. I don't see any problem with using the word disaster, and I'm not at all sure that people who avoid thinking about it are going to make that fine a distinction.
Thank you. I think we'll have some choices here, so people will get a chance to weigh in on that.
I'm more inclined to be worried about using the term neighborhood in our name so that it's clear the scope.
If we're going to narrow it down, we're obviously still going to be considering Seattle Emergency Hubs. We're probably still going to be considering Seattle Emergency Communication Hub or Seattle Disaster Communication Hubs, whichever we want to say. But I do think a number of people have said that the word neighbor or neighborhood would be useful if we didn't use the word communications, because it would say that we're not a citywide response group. It does help describe the scope of what a hub covers. And I think that that's sort of interesting. So I think that maybe, those should be on the ballot. But what I'm wondering is, there are others that people would like to nominate to save, because we've got a few other suggestions down here.
I think neighborhood is critical. Because otherwise they think it's like the Office of Emergency Management for the city or anything else. Or the power company's emergency management. I think neighborhood is critical. I think hub is a really important word. We like it. It makes sense to people. It's just, what's that other qualifier in my head?
The reason why it's Seattle is because we don't go beyond the borders. If we pick a name like Cascadia or Puget Sound, we don't train anybody. We don't create hubs outside Seattle. If we ever want to expand that, we're going to have to hire staff because Ann and I can hardly keep up with inside the city of Seattle.
I really like the word neighborhood, but we all have hubs many of which already have neighborhood names embedded in them.
I think I've seen that having the word Seattle in our name implies to the public that we are a city asset. I feel like I'm explaining myself a lot, that we work with the city, but not for the city.
Yeah, like I was interviewed just this last week by some people from the UW, and they just said, oh, well, you get money from the Office of Emergency Management in Seattle, right? And I said, no, we do not. That's kind of be an assumption. I think we've got enough to go on, and please, if you do have other comments, please, feel free to email me, and I'll put my email in the chat. And I'm open. I won't do anything about this probably till after the drill. So if you see me that day in June, you can bend my ear that day too. But yeah, I won't do anything right away. So let me know if there's more to this, and we'll try to be as fair as possible to everybody's concerns, and we'll put together some choices. Thank you very much for all your comments. I really appreciate it, and I'll get back to you.
Around the room, we can have announcements. People can introduce themselves if they would like to. Northwest.
In Finney this past Sunday, I conducted a training. It was sort of like a hands-on Hub 101. We've had 3 to 4 people that have joined the team since the last drill, so they've never really experienced the hub. But we set up the stations, the different stations, and went through scenarios and discussed the different issues, the one-to-many situations, how services needed would work. But it was very successful, and I was pleased with the turnout.
I am almost ready to submit my grant to the Office of Neighborhoods to get my box and stock it with stuff.
Yeah, the Madison Valley Hub in early May had an event where we played the mutual aid mission game that Diane Camber has created. I don't know if other people have seen that game or played it, but it was a way to get people to learn about how a hub operates, how information flows, the different roles in kind of a fun, easy way. So it was a small event. We had about 10 people there playing the game. It was a good experience for people, and it's, I think, something other hubs could consider as a way to train people on the basics of a hub.
Great, Mark. Thank you. Now we know about that. Sounds great. Let's see. We will now go back to the Northwest. Jody?
We're going to be writing Ballard-specific scenarios. This is one of the things that our people wanted, was specific scenario, the scripts that are specific to Ballard. Then we're going to get, a couple of weeks after that, we're going to get the boxes out, go into the box again with everybody, which we haven't done for a long while. And then we're planning to have, to activate for a day in July. I was gone for almost 7 months, so we're gathering strength and we'll have at it.
Northeast?
Yeah, so our Laurelhurst, either disaster or emergency hub, is having their drill on September 20th. We're a little bit later than some of the others, and we have our first aid tent ready to go. We have our tent, our sign, our table, our chairs, our first aid kit, our equipment like a pulse oximeter, stethoscope, sphygmomanometer, and posters and other info. We have an ad an announcement in the Laurelhurst newsletter asking if there are other medical people in the neighborhood who want to help in the planning. So we're moving forward with that.
Yeah, Pinehurst. So still getting my feet wet and understanding more about the hubs. Looking forward to attending the drill on the 7th. So I'll be there through the whole thing to watch everything going on. There's a subgroup of the Pinehurst team that's looking at the Pinehurst Fest on July, I think it's the 18th. We'll be setting up our hub and being able to show everybody what's going on there. And then also working with the people who usually make sure that we've got the neighborhood night out, the street block for, I think it's August 4th. Also looking to open up the hub there. So a couple different opportunities this summer. Again, getting my feet wet, figuring out what we're going to be doing, but got some good things happening this summer.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Central West.
Bill and I went to the Magnolia Community Council meeting last Tuesday on the 20th, and I had a chance at the end to make a few remarks about the 4 fellows who are in training now to be a hubcap in Magnolia. Will be attending one or both events, and we'll see where we can go with that, see what that's productive of.
I've been helping Frank out with this training of more people here in Magnolia. I now live in Magnolia. I don't live in Queen Anne anymore. So
Central Core, Central East.
There's a new hub going in at Cal Anderson Park, and they submitted the grant for their box last week. They'll have a grand opening. I'll let you guys know the date of that when that happens.
Super. Southwest.
On May 18th, in West Seattle, there's a group called West Seattle Bike Connections, and they had been talking about wanting to do an exercise where cargo bikes are used in a disaster response type scenario. But they didn't want to do it citywide. They just kind of wanted to do let's see how this would work. And so on May 18th, they had 25 people sign up for this event. They rode to 6 different locations, 3 of which were hubs. This is at the Pigeon Point hub. And at each of those locations, including also our tool library and an edible garden, they got a little topic talk. Here's how to sanitize water. Here's how to turn off your utilities. Here's how to build a kit. And here's what a hub looks like. The Salvation Army hub opened up their box and showed the bikers. And so it generated a lot of interest around how you can use bikes after a disaster. So now that West Seattle Bike Connections has done that, they were Seattle Cascade Bike Club was not part of the organizers because they just didn't have a person they could devote to it, but they're looking at that now, and maybe this can be expanded and either go across the city on a larger ride, or different neighborhoods can duplicate it. So stay tuned for that. Second report I have is from my own hub. Finally, some progress in my own hub. We have a group that works with the Gatewood Elementary School on the parent reunification, making sure people are aware of how that happens. There's a group of about 6 neighbors who live near the school who would stand up and help the school in a disaster. And their last conversation was resulted in the principal deciding that she was going to put our 1-page reunification tip sheet into the parents' new parent packet, and creating signage so that if there is any reason that school has to lock down and they have to enact their reunification, that the signage can be put out by the neighbors to help parents who didn't read the paperwork know where to go to gather to be ready to enter into the reunification process. And the third element that came out of that was that we've asked the principal, what is your plan to get the students back into school? How will you know if it's safe to go back in your school? Or what are your plans? And she's like, oh yeah, she's going back to the school district going, you guys have said that you're going to send someone out to inspect our buildings. Tell me how that's going to happen if you can't get across the Duwamish River. So I cannot wait to hear the answer to that. So I'll let everybody know what comes out of that. So there's other activities going on. I know Erica had to drop off, but I think that's about the highlights for West Seattle, Southwest.
Great, thanks. Anybody from Southeast?
Lakewood Seward Park, I'm going to make this really quick because I've had a lot of airtime tonight. Our hub couldn't get a date in our site to have a drill this summer. So we decided we're doing Summer of Outreach. We've got 9 outreach events, 2 of which have already happened. We had a great day yesterday at the Columbia City Farmers Market, and at a future meeting, I'm going to show you the kind of stuff that we put on our booth and everything. We had some great ideas. So
that'd be great for our next sharing best practices, showing us some pictures and all what that looked like. Yeah, thanks. All right. Any last comments from anyone?
All these folks were saying, I'm doing events. If you want them on the hub calendar, you got to send them in to us. I've been writing them down to go, and I got to follow up if I don't find that on the calendar. And it's easy to say for our local neighbors, it doesn't have to be put on there as though you're expecting the whole community to come. But if you don't put it on the calendar, nobody knows about it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you, Linda.